Polish, right? Okay. Nazywam się Magdalena Staniek, mam 60 lat i urodziłam się w Polsce, w Białymstoku. Poland was nominally a sovereign state, but we were under the Soviet sphere of influence, so part of the Eastern Bloc, behind the Iron Curtain, however you want to describe it, and therefore the language, even though our official language was Polish, in schools from the age of 7, we were learning Russian as a mandatory subject. As I was born in 65, so I'm 60 now, exactly 60. So I spent most of my life living in Poznań, so it's a city in the western part of Poland. I was very fortunate because when we were living in Poznań, I actually had my own bedroom because it was a two-room house, so it wasn't like, two-room apartment. So it wasn't, you didn't describe the apartments as two-bedroom, you described them as two rooms because it was clear that the living room also served as a bedroom, right? So there would be a sofa or a couple of sofas and people just slept on them, and then you put the bedding, inside the sofa, which is kind of specially built sofas. You could put the bedding in, and then, it was a sofa during the day, so you would sit on. So I had my own bedroom, which was very, very unusual, with a little balcony and everything. But for instance, my best friend, there were 5 of them. So the 3 generations. So there was Kasia and her brother, her parents. They all inhabited the living room, and then the grandma, because she was the oldest, right, and she got her own room. So that was not unusual. That's sort of how people lived, right? Officially, there was no class system because everybody was a worker, but in reality, it was very much divided, okay? And for instance, the intelligentsia were sort of looking down upon the classes that were, private enterprise, right? It was almost like a badge of honor to have be wearing some sort of a, jumper with holes on the sleeves or something, because, and not having, great furniture, and certainly not having a car or anything like that, because that means you're an intellectual and you're part of the, intelligentsia. I was a city kid. I grew up in, big cities, so among concrete blocks, and the roads were not, there wasn't a lot of traffic. A lot of people didn't, most people didn't have cars, right? So there wasn't a lot of traffic, but still, it was just sort of a concrete jungle. So I would go and visit my grandmother in another city across Poland, in Białystok, and then we would go to a small village, and there was absolutely nothing to do, okay? So there was nothing to do, and it was brilliant. So I remember spending summers sitting, climbing a cherry tree or something in the orchard, and just sitting and doing nothing. We didn't have, or reading a book, basically, yeah. So reading a book, so obviously, no iPads, no iPhones, no anything like that. Few toys that I had, maybe some cuddly toys, etc. And I would just sit and hang out and watch, literally watch butterflies fly and, caterpillars crawl, and go down to the stream and just hang out and look at the water shimmer and, that sort of thing. So, sounds really romantic and boring maybe, but that's basically what we did, and, and it was great. I still have really, really fond memories of that because it was so different from the city. First time I actually saw commercials on TV was when we escaped Poland and when we went to West Berlin. And I remember just sitting and actually watching commercials because they were just so, it was such a new thing, right? I think overall, actually, I got a pretty damn good education. I think not only did we have, pretty good, solid understanding or education of Russian history, of course, a certain view of the Russian history, but we also learned about English history. We learned about English kings. We learned in geography lessons. We had to learn all countries and their capitals, and usually natural resources and topography, mountain ranges, that kind of thing. And then we had Christmas ball, so we would all dress up in different costumes. So now parents were then tasked with making costumes out of whatever stuff they had, scraps of material or something that they had. And so the idea was I was supposed to be a red poppy, because poppy is a Polish, sort of traditional flower, and I was supposed to be a red poppy, but I looked like cabbage, right? that was the end effect. But the costume was made out of paper, a crepe paper that's not very visible because it just couldn't get fabrics really easily, right? And my mom actually stapled, you can see the staples and stuff. So it was like around my waistband. There was just like this piece of cardboard going around, and it was all stapled, and the crepe was stapled, and the same thing on my head. And I think you can also see my underwear underneath, but it was all red. So that was kind of a classic example of a kind of a costume that was more homemade. Yes, towards the late 70s, actually closer to the 80s, paper was very difficult to get, to find. So paper. Like what you would call like copybooks and things like that, notebooks, right? And also what was particularly difficult to get was carbon copies, okay? And there's a reason for that, because paper became a political commodity. Because what do you do with the carbon copy? You copy stuff, right? So what became typical when sort of the solidarity movement was nascent, at the end of 1979, 1980, people would copy contraband, either literature or make leaflets or things like that. So suddenly there was a massive shortage of paper in Polish stationery shops. We remembered our grandparents and in some cases our parents talking to us about the Second World War. So usually what we would do, we would just go and play again, reenact some battles, Battle of Stalingrad or something like that. So the biggest, the most sort of strongest, most boisterous kids would be the Russians, right? So they were like sort of the superhuman, the heroes, right? So they were the Russians because they won the war, yeah. The sort of more mediocre kids, kind of like, maybe not so grown up or not so brave would be the Poles, and then the ones, the smallest ones, the scrawniest kids would be the Germans, because ultimately they got their asses kicked. So we'd be just like running around with sticks and reenact some Second World War battles. During the 70s, as more and more countries were becoming independent, a lot of people, particularly from the northern African states, so we had some Egyptians, Libyans coming to study in Polish universities and then intermarrying and just living their lives in Poland. But it wasn't, it wasn't very common. Poland was very homogeneous, ethnically very, very homogeneous back then. But of course we did have ethnic minorities, religious minorities, but generally they were just kind of not making themselves very visible, okay? So, and actually I remember there was one thing that was, very, very, very sad and but you lived, right? This was a lived experience. I remember it was quite common to see on a bus, when you would go on a bus or tram or something in the summer, so people wearing short sleeves and some men or women would be holding to the rail, and the older ones quite often had a tattoo on their forearm. So, but it wasn't a tattoo, the kind of tattoo that we have today, but it was the number, and the number is the concentration camp number. So that was quite common to see that. So we lived with this kind of presence of the Second World War and a kind of a trauma of that. Nominally we were a socialist state. I remember there was this one poem, so that's kind of, that just give you a little taste of the tone of those things, yeah? So I still remember a bit of that poem that I was supposed to say, so I'm going to say it in Polish and then translate it into English. So I was just standing there and I had to say like, o, idą budowlani, w kombinezony są ubrani, za nimi ćwiki z długą szyją, brawo murarze, niech tam żyją. So it's, oh, here go the construction workers. They're all dressed in their overalls, right? They're all dressed in their overalls, and behind them there are cranes with long necks. Long live the bricklayers, bravo! Yeah.